Before the rise of the great Arab kingdoms of Al-Hirah and Ghassan, and before the Byzantine and Sasanian empires completely dominated the frontier, Arab storytellers remembered a king whose wisdom, ambition, and, well, deeply tragic fate became one of the absolute greatest legends of ancient Arabia. His name was Jadhima al-Abrash. Today, in this explainer, we're stepping into a sweeping, cinematic world of ancient mystery, shifting desert sands, and the incredible collision of historical fact with towering Arabian myth.
Okay, let's dive right into this. To really understand Jadhima, we first have to understand his world. This was the Near East during late antiquity. And you have to imagine, the Arabian Peninsula was essentially squeezed, just trapped, really, between two massive rival superpowers, the Byzantine Empire to the northwest and the Sassanid Persian Empire to the northeast. Section 1. Arabia Before Great Kingdoms, the World of Late Antiquity.
So the geopolitical landscape back then was frankly incredibly volatile. The peninsula was split into roughly 3 major power zones. You see, the superpowers I just mentioned, they didn't really want to constantly fight the nomadic desert tribes directly. It just wasn't worth the resources. Instead, they used Arab vassal kingdoms as buffers. The Byzantines backed the Ghassanids, and the Persians backed the Lakhmids over in Al-Hirah. But what about the central and northern tribal zones? Well, that was an area defined by constant intra-tribal warfare. Yet at the exact same time, it was crossed by these incredibly vital, wealthy trade routes connecting east and west. This crucible of wealth and warfare, it created the perfect, chaotic environment for local strongmen to rise up and become legendary kings.
Section 2. Jadhima, History and Legend.
Now, what's really fascinating here is that there are kind of 2 faces to this Arabian king. In strict archaeological reality, Jadhima was absolutely a real historical figure. He was a 3rd century CE king of the powerful Tanukh tribe, and this is actually authenticated by the famous al-Jamal inscription from right around 250 CE. But in the literary legend, the stories preserved by medieval Arab historians, he's known by the surnames al-Abrash or al-Waddah, which both translate to the leper. In these sweeping narratives, he's elevated from a tribal leader into this mythical innovator. He's credited as literally being the first Arab to use candles, wear sandals, and even build catapults. How wild is that? This lore really catches fire thanks to an incredible collision between 2 massive figures. On one side, you have Jadhima, the mighty and revered emir, and on the other, Queen Al-Zabba, who is actually widely identified by modern scholars as the famous Zenobia, Queen of Palmyra. This intense rivalry sparks one of the absolute greatest legends in all of Arabic literature.
Section 3. The Rise of Al-Zabba. According to the traditional accounts, Queen Naila was an absolute tactical genius. To consolidate her power across the region, she constructed 2 magnificent palaces on either side of the Euphrates River. She settled her sister, Zainab, in the Eastern Palace to govern the tribes of Iraq, while Naila herself ruled from the Western Palace. Her ultimate goal? To absolutely subjugate the recalcitrant Arab tribes of the Levant.
But she had one massive problem blocking her path: Jadhima. Despite his disfigurement from leprosy, he was revered by his people for his immense strength and valor. The queen lived in absolute dread of him. She knew that if she could just eliminate Jadhima, no other Arab prince would dare stand in her way. So, think about it. How do you eliminate a king who is practically invincible in battle? Well, you don't fight him. You lure him. She sent Jadhima this cloying, flattering letter claiming the scepter had grown way too heavy for her frail hand, and she offered him her kingdom and her hand in marriage.
Section 4. The Fatal Invitation.
Now, Jadhima had a fiercely loyal advisor and boon companion named Qasir. And Qasir, he immediately smelled a trap. He desperately warned his king against the queen's suspicious invitation. But Jadhima, perhaps blinded by ambition or maybe just sheer pride, accepted anyway. As they left the Syrian castle of Bakak and approached the queen's territory, Qasir uttered a phrase that would forever enter the Arabic language as a famous proverb: "You left prudence at Bakam." Picture this. As they approached the palace through a blinding sandstorm, the tension must have been palpable. Qasir devised a final, desperate test of trust. He turns to Jadhima and says, "Watch the queen's cavalry. If they ride out and hail you as their new king, we can trust Naila. But if they move to encircle us, it is a deadly trap. If that happens, you must immediately mount Al-Asa," which was this fabled, impossibly fast black stallion, and fleeing to the desert. The sandstorm clears, the cavalry rides out, and they move to encircle. It was a trap all along. But here is the ultimate tragedy of Jadhima. Refusing to show even a hint of cowardice or weakness before his enemies, Jadhima actually stood his ground. He knew it meant a swift and merciless death. But in his final act as king, he commanded his loyal advisor Qasir to take the fabled stallion and escape. So Qasir leaps onto Al-Asa, completely breaking through the enemy lines, and escapes across the treacherous desert sands. He rides like the wind back to the Azidi tents to warn Jadhima's people of this ultimate betrayal. Back at the palace, the conclusion is just chilling. Jadhima is captured. According to the lore, he's bled into a golden bowl, poisoned by the very woman he thought he was going to marry. As he perishes, he curses her, but the queen merely laughs. She mocks his final words, knowing he's been completely outsmarted. Naila, she declares, shall not die by Jadhima's right arm. Section 5. Escape and Vow of Revenge. When Qasir finally reaches the tribe, Jadhima's young nephew, Amr ibn Adi, is unanimously acclaimed as the new emir. And Amr burns with thar, which is this deep cultural demand for revenge that absolutely no financial compensation, no bloodwit could ever satisfy. He vows to restore the honor of his tribe, and this sets the stage for a truly masterful deception. Qasir, the loyal advisor, actually returns to the queen's court disguised as a merchant. He's playing a long game of espionage here. He sells these precious rubies from India to win her trust. He even brings her sacks of gold dinars straight from Amr's own treasure house to prove his quote-unquote loyalty. But while inside the palace, Qasir uncovers an incredible twist. The woman who killed Jadhima, the woman he faced in the Western Palace, it wasn't Queen Naila at all. It was her sister, Zainab, acting as a decoy. Zenobia had been so terrified of Jadhima's physical power that she actually hid away and used her sister to spring the trap. Section 6. Legacy of an Arabian King. So, you might be wondering, how do we even know this story today? Well, these gripping narratives were meticulously preserved. First, they were passed down for generations through incredibly rich oral traditions. Then, centuries later, medieval Arabic scholars and genealogists committed them to paper. Historians like Ibn al-Qalbi, who specialized in deep tribal histories, and compilers of classical literature like the Kitab al-Aghani, ensured that the dramatic spirit of pre-Islamic Arabia survived the test of time. Perhaps the most famous of these is the monumental work of al-Tabari. Scholars like him beautifully blended these literary legends with whatever historical chronologies they had available. In doing so, they weren't just recording dates, right? They were actively shaping Arab cultural identity, preserving the ideals of heroic kingship, loyalty, and prudence for centuries to come. Which leaves us with this final thought. We have the al-Jimal inscription proving Jadhima actually lived, and we have the breathtaking poetry and lore detailing exactly how he died. Whether remembered as a historical king or a legendary hero, Jadhima al-Abrash continues to symbolize the courage, ambition, and tragic destiny that define history's greatest rulers. Legends often preserve the actual spirit of an age even when hard history cannot confirm every cinematic detail. So ask yourself this. When we look back at the figures who shape our world today, centuries from now, what will be recorded as fact and what will be remembered as legend?